everyone, Witch Hazel again. Thank you for joining me. I thought I would put together a video. I was just watching another video the other day about what to do if you're having to come out of the broom closet, so to speak, with your family. And I know this is a very important topic for a lot of witches, and I thought I would put together my own take on it, specifically because I did not have to go through that process, and I am very grateful for that. So I wanted to share with you how I actually became a witch. I was not raised in any specific religion. By default, we were Christian. I mean, we bought a Christmas tree at Christmas. We had the presents, and we celebrated Easter insofar as we had a present hunt. We didn't do an egg hunt. We did gifts in my family. And that was about it. My mother she was baptized into some type of Protestant religion, I believe. I don't know which one specifically. And she was not raised with a whole lot of religion from that. As far as I know, she and her family, they didn't attend church or do anything like that. My father, on the other hand, was raised in a very devoutly Catholic household in Austria. My mom's family is German, my father is Austrian. And for my father, that was not a good experience. So he basically swore off anything Catholic, and he is now more agnostic. As for myself, as said, I wasn't really raised with much other than Christmas. At 17, I enlisted in the army. That was not pre-planned. I am not hugely patriotic, anything like that. It was a matter of some bad times had hit my family, and the recruiter promised a place to stay, food, a good education. It sounded pretty good. So I said, where do I sign? And shortly after my 18th birthday, I actually left for the military for basic training. Now, the one thing about this was I did not go by myself. I'm a twin, and my sister and I signed up to go together. So we went together, and we were almost immediately separated. That is something that the military does because of issues with siblings. I don't know if any of you have seen the old black and white film about the Sullivan brothers. 5 of them in the Navy, all on the same ship. That did not end well. So siblings normally are separated. So my sister and I wound up in different companies. And basic training being basic training, it was very difficult, and the only way that we could see each other was to go to church on Sunday, because all of the companies went to the same church. So we became churchgoers in order to sit with each other and see each other. During that time, I really enjoyed the church service. It was upbeat, people were singing, people were dancing. It was a lot of fun. I thought, gee, this is nice. Now, fast forward just a little bit. I finished basic training. I went to my initial job training in Texas, and the drill sergeants there were actually worse than those I had in basic training. It was not fun. And my sister, on top of that, my sister had decided not to stay in the military, so I was completely on my own at this point. That didn't bother me so much, but I really felt like something was lacking in my life. I needed something else. I no longer had this nice warm cocoon of my family, and I felt very alone. So I thought, aha, well, I really enjoyed church service in basic training. I bet I would enjoy attending church. Maybe I should get some religion in my life. Maybe that's what I need. So I went to one church service when I got to this new post, and it was just like night and day. It was boring, it was monotone, there was no light from the windows were tiny, there was just, the atmosphere was completely different. And that's when I realized, okay, so it wasn't really the church that I was enjoying, it was the energy. So I said, okay, let me see what I like. And I started trying out different churches. It hadn't occurred to me at this point to try something non-Christian. I attended after that Catholic services, mainly because of my family. Most of my family are Catholic and fairly devout. And this was something that reminded me of them. So it gave a little piece of home to be in a part of a Catholic Mass. But again, I realized, the message I was getting from the pulpit was not sinking in. It didn't mean anything to me. But what I did enjoy about Catholic services was the ornamentation, the incense, the colors, the music, and most especially, this is something I have always loved. I have had the good fortune to travel in a lot of places and see a lot of the cathedrals, especially in Europe. The stained glass. The stained glass with just the light coming in with these colors, all the different colors, and you can see the little dust particles floating through the air. It's just the most beautiful thing in the world. And that, to me, I would zone out and look at these little dust particles and think, now that is a representation of the divine. That is spirit coming through these windows. And that was what I enjoyed. So I thought, well, I still need to find something else. So the traditional church is not for me. And by this time, fast forward some more, I was attending the latter part of my training in Washington, D.C. And I remember chatting with my mom briefly about it. I don't think we talked in any great detail, but I mentioned I was trying to find something that was meaningful to me, some sort of group religion that I could be a part of. My father was very, very unhappy with this because from his point of view and from his experience, he is very happy with me finding my own spirituality. He has no problem with that. Whatever it may be, it's fine. Whenever I mention a group, he gets very nervous, as though just walking through the doors will brainwash me. So I try to be careful how I mention my explorations to my father, because he does not like the idea of group religion. To him, once you get a group involved, this is when it falls apart. And I can understand that, and I can respect that, so I do try to be careful with what groups I attend and what I take from those meetings. But aside from that, I spoke with my mother, and she actually sent me my very first book on Wicca, and it was Scott Cunningham's Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner. And she put a little note, enjoy, love mom, something like that. And the reason she had sent me this book was actually because my mom, Wicca is her preferred religion. Now, she had never practiced this through the entire time that I was growing up, but there were parts, bits and pieces of it kind of floating in the periphery of home. My mom has always been interested in the supernatural, for example, in paganism, in earth worship and earth correspondences, connections, incense, essential oils, all of that. It was kind of around, but not formally. So my mom, having been a teenager in the 70s and getting into the whole first wave of the, well, 1.5 wave of the neo-paganism movement, she had a lot of the first run books. The Farrars, Scott Cunningham, Raymond Buckland, all of that. I remembered some of the authors actually from tooling through my mom's books. And so she chose this one as a good starter for me, and she sent it to me, and that just clicked. I read through the book, I said, now this is something that I can understand. This is something I can relate to. I can see trees, earth, water. I can see the wind in the leaves. This is something that makes sense to me in a way that the sense of spirit in the Christian church was not coming across to me. Over time, I think now I relate to it, or I can relate to it more, but at the time, all I was receiving was the message of, you must believe this, because, and that was it. And that did not work for me. Paganism, Wicca in particular, was something much more tangible for me. And I started in on that path from the moment I got that book and never looked back. The fun thing about it is that once I decided this was my path, doors opened up. I like to think of it as the grasshopper theory, you know, that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And all of a sudden, I was surrounded by pagans. And it was the funnest thing ever. When I was still in Washington, D.C., I was at nursing school, living in the barracks. I was getting ready to go on a camping trip with my classmates, and the sergeant who was doing guard duty in the office for that day, he saw my necklace, which incidentally was a gift from my mother for my 16th birthday, and I've never taken it off since. I've worn it every day since. He saw my necklace and he asked if I was pagan. I said, well, I'm looking into it. He said, well, if you ever want to chat, let me know. And I looked at him a little bit funny. He rolled up his sleeve and had a pentacle tattooed on his arm. He said, we have a group here on post. If you ever want to join us, let me know. So that was a good experience. I'm very glad I met him. And then later on, when I went from my training to my duty station at Fort Carson, I decided to look into the Open Circle there, which was the pagan group. It was basically the group for anyone who did not fall into one of the church groups on post. They, meaning the military, was obligated to give us a space, but that was about it. So we had everybody else. We had Wiccans, Dionysic pagans, we had eclectic, we had Norse, or Asatru, we had, what else did we have? Buddhists, even in our group, because they didn't fit into any of the other groups on post. And one token Satanist. We did have one of those. So these coven meetings were very, very useful to me because we had to get along. We all had to work together because this was what we had to work with. And because of that, we rotated the knowledge that we brought in, what we worked with. We didn't have one set tradition because we wanted to honor everyone's traditions. And it was a great way to learn just starting out. Each ritual, each esbat, every time we did something, we would bring in a different aspect so we could kind of taste test everything. It was a wonderful experience. We also changed roles within the coven. Frequently, we did have one set high priestess because we had to have an organizer for the group, but she did not always perform the role of high priestess. We all traded roles, and it was a great experience. And I still remember very happily the first day that I went to this group meeting. I found the spot where it was listed in the little newspaper that they were, and I went and I knocked on the door. And remember, I come from what we like to say in my family, a cold, hard people. We're German, Austrian background. We're not very lovey-dovey. We're not very warm and feeling. It's assumed we love each other. It's there, but we don't do the kissy-huggy thing. So you'll see why I'm bringing this up in a second. So I knock on the door, a little bit timid. A man opens the door. He's wearing a cape and a kilt. And he asks, "Hi, can I help you?" And I look at him, I say, "Well, I'm looking for the Fort Carson Open Circle. And he just opened up his arms. He said, "Welcome, you're among pagan friends." And he gave me the biggest bear hug ever. Which I was just like, "Ah, you're hugging me. Why are you hugging me?" It took me a long time to get used to that, but that was my introduction, my initiation into a circle, and it was absolutely wonderful from there on out. So that is my little story I thought I would share in case it is of interest or use to anyone. I did not have to go through a terrible time coming out of the broom closet. For me, it was a natural evolution, and I really hope that for many of you, or for most of you, it can also be that way, because it was really wonderful and continues to be. I love all of the new pagan friends I meet and make whenever I can. So, including now all of you on YouTube. So thank you very much for visiting, and see you later.